The last time I stood in my father's study, he called me a liability and gave me 20 minutes to pack my life into a single suitcase. He told me my pregnancy would bankrupt the family name. 7 years later, I am sitting in a glass-walled conference room, staring at a signature on a distressed loan document. My father does not know it yet, but the liability he threw away just bought his debt, and I am coming to collect. The bathroom in my father's house always smelled like lavender and cold marble. It was a sterile, polished scent, the kind that tried to convince you that nothing messy or human ever happened inside these walls. I was 24 years old, kneeling on the heated tile floor, gripping the porcelain rim of the toilet as my stomach turned itself inside out for the third time that morning. I flushed the toilet and sat back against the wall, trembling. The nausea was not just physical. It was a heavy, suffocating dread that had settled in my chest 6 weeks ago and refused to leave. I pressed a hand to my stomach. There was nothing to show yet. No bump, no change in the silhouette of my silk dress. But I felt different. I felt occupied. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Dinner would be served in 15 minutes. In the Patterson household, lateness was not a mistake. It was a character flaw. I stood up and rinsed my mouth with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale, clammy. I pinched my cheeks to force some color into them. I had to look perfect. I had to look like Stella Patterson, the dutiful daughter, the silent asset, the girl who would never do anything to embarrass the family name. My father, Gordon Patterson, treated reputation like oxygen. He ran Patterson Ridge Development with a terrifying, meticulous efficiency, building luxury estates for people who wanted to pretend they had old money. He believed that if you polished a surface hard enough, you could hide the rot underneath. I was about to become the rot. I walked down the grand staircase, my hand trailing lightly over the mahogany banister. The house was quiet. It was always quiet. My mother, Elaine, was already in the dining room, adjusting the placement of the silverware. She looked up as I entered, her smile tight and practiced. "You look pale." "Stella," she said, "are you feeling all right?" "I am fine, Mom, just tired." Gordon walked in a moment later. He did not say hello. He walked straight to the head of the table, checked his watch, and sat down. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and imposing, with silver hair that was always perfectly coiffed. He wore a suit, even for a Tuesday night dinner with his family. To him, there was no distinction between business and life. Everything was a transaction. "Sit," he said. I sat. The maid brought out the first course, a cucumber soup that smelled sharply of dill. The smell hit me like a physical blow. My stomach lurched. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. "Is something wrong with the soup?" Gordon asked. His voice was low, dangerous. He hated it when people did not appreciate the things he paid for. "No," I said. "It smells delicious." "Then eat." I picked up my spoon. My hand was shaking. I tried to lift it to my mouth, but the smell was too much. I dropped the spoon. It clattered against the china. A loud, jarring sound in the silent room. Gordon sighed. He put down his fork and looked at me. His eyes were cold, calculating. He looked at me the way he looked at a contractor who was behind schedule. "What is going on with you?" "Stella, you have been acting strange for weeks. Distracted, sloppy. I heard you were late to the charity luncheon yesterday. I felt the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I was not sloppy. I was terrified. I took a deep breath. I could not do this anymore. I could not hide it. "Dad," I said, "I have something to tell you." Gordon leaned back in his chair. He crossed his arms over his chest. "I am listening." I looked at my mother. She was staring at her water glass, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew. Mothers always knew. But she would never say it. She would let me drown before she would rock the boat. "I am pregnant," I whispered. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and thick, suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the hall. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Gordon did not blink. He did not move. He just stared at me, his face completely expressionless. "Pregnant." He repeated. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like a dirty joke. Yes. Who is the father, Nate Keller? Gordon let out a short, harsh laugh. The landscaper's son. The boy who barely finished community college. He is a good person. Dad, he is a nobody, Gordon snapped. And you are unmarried. We can get married. We stop, Gordon said. He stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out at the manicured lawn. The perfect hedges. The world he had built to keep the chaos out. You think I'm going to let you drag that boy and his bastard child into this house? You think I am going to let you parade your mistake around Briar Glen? It is not a mistake, I said, my voice trembling. It is a baby. It is a liability. Gordon turned around, his face red, his eyes blazing. That is what you are. Stella, you are a liability. I have spent 20 years building this name. I have spent a fortune making sure people respect us. And you want to ruin it all because you could not keep your legs closed, Gordon, my mother gasped. He ignored her. He pointed a finger at me. Get out. What I asked. Stunned. You heard me. Get out. I will not have you living under my roof. I will not have you shaming this family. Pack a bag. You have 20 minutes. Dad, please, I begged. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you decided to be a whore, he said. I looked at my mother. Mom, please. Elaine looked up then. Her eyes were wet, but her face was set in stone. She looked at Gordon, and then she looked at me, and then she looked back at her water glass. She picked it up and took a sip. That silence broke me more than the yelling. It was a confirmation that I was alone, that my value to them was conditional, that love, in this house, was just another contract, and I had breached the terms. I stood up. I did not say another word. I walked out of the dining room, up the stairs, and into my bedroom. I took the largest suitcase I had. I packed my clothes, my toiletries, my laptop. I did not take any of the jewelry Gordon had bought me. I did not take the family photos. I left everything that belonged to the Pattersons behind. When I walked out the front door 20 minutes later, Gordon was standing in the hallway, watching me. He did not look sad. He looked relieved. He looked like he had just cut a losing stock from his portfolio. Do not come back. Stella, he said, not until you have fixed this. I did not look back. I got into my car, a sensible sedan that I had paid for myself, and drove away. I drove until the manicured lawns of Briar Glen faded into the darkness. I drove until I couldn't see the house anymore, and only then did I pull over to the side of the road and scream. I moved to Riverton the next day. It was only 40 minutes away from Briar Glen, but it felt like a different planet. Briar Glen was all wrought iron gates and private security. Riverton was brick apartment buildings with fire escapes and diners that stayed open 24 hours a day. I found a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. The paint was peeling in the hallway, and the radiator clanked like a dying engine, but it was clean, and it was mine. The rent was $800 a month. I had $5,000 in my savings account. It would have to be enough. I needed a job. I walked into Harborline Credit Union 3 days later, wearing my best suit, trying to hide the fact that I was nauseous and terrified. I had a degree in art history, a useless piece of paper that Gordon had allowed because he thought it made me look cultured. It did not qualify me for much, but I was organized, and I was desperate. They hired me as an administrative assistant. The pay was $12 an hour. It was less money than I used to spend on a pair of shoes, but when the branch manager, Mrs. Gable, handed me my first paycheck, I felt a surge of pride that I had never felt when Gordon handed me his credit card. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment that night, eating a sandwich from the deli downstairs. I placed a hand on my stomach. I promise you, I whispered to the empty room, you will never feel unwanted. You will never feel like a mistake. I will build a life for us. I will build a home where no one can ever kick us out. Even if I have to swallow my pride every single day. Even if I have to be someone else, you will be safe. Nate Keller did not vanish in a puff of smoke. That would have been easier. A villain is easy to hate. A coward is harder to grieve. I called him the day after I moved into the apartment. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Riverton and his parents' house. He looked tired. He looked young. My dad. He kicked me out. I told him. Nate winced. He looked down at his coffee cup. Jesus. Stella, that is intense. I am keeping the baby. Nate. He nodded slowly. Right. Yeah. Of course. I need to know if you are in this. I said, I need to know if we are doing this together. Nate sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, Stella, I care about you. You know that. But my dad has been on my case about finishing my certification, and money is tight right now. I do not know if I can handle a baby right now. I mean, we are barely 24. We do not have a choice. Nate? He looked at me then, and I saw the fear in his eyes. It was not the panic of a man facing a crisis. It was the evasiveness of a boy who wanted the problem to just go away. I will help, he said. I will send you money when I can. But I cannot. I cannot move in with you. I cannot play house right now. I need to figure my own life out. I watched him for a long moment. I realized then that I had been waiting for him to save me. I had been waiting for him to be the hero who stood up to my father and swept me away. But Nate was not a hero. He was just a guy who was afraid of his own shadow. Okay, I said. Okay, he asked, looking relieved. I stood up. I do not need your money. Nate, and I do not need your excuses. If you are not here, then you are not here. Do not come halfway. Stella, wait. I walked out. I did not look back. I chose stability over chaos. I chose to be alone rather than to be with someone who made me feel lonely. The months passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination. My belly grew. The stairs to my apartment seemed to get steeper every day. My ankles swelled. I spent my days filing paperwork at the credit union and my nights reading books about pregnancy and childbirth. My son, Owen, was born on a rainy Tuesday in November. I drove myself to the hospital when the contractions were 5 minutes apart. I labored alone for 14 hours. When the nurse placed him in my arms, red-faced and screaming, I felt a love so fierce it terrified me. He was small, he was helpless, and he was entirely mine. I did not have a family, so I built one. Marcy Holloway lived in the apartment next door. She was a retired schoolteacher with bright red hair and a laugh that shook the walls. She found me crying in the hallway one day when I could not get Owen's stroller up the stairs. She carried the stroller up for me, made me a cup of tea, and told me that babies were resilient and that mothers were tougher than they looked. She became my grandmother by proxy, the person who watched Owen when I had to work late, the person who taught me how to swaddle him so he would sleep through the night. Then there was Dr. Eris at the Riverton Family Clinic. He was a quiet, steady man who never rushed our appointments. He treated Owen's ear infections and his fevers with a calm competence that made me feel safe. He never asked about Owen's father. He never looked at my cheap clothes or my tired eyes with judgment. He just treated us like people who mattered. These were my anchors. They were small, but they kept me afloat. When Owen was 6 months old, I returned to work at Harborline Credit Union. I was tired all the time. I smelled like spit-up and stale coffee, but I was focused. I had to be. One afternoon, I was filing loan applications in the back office. It was mindless work, sorting papers into alphabetical order. My eyes scanned the names automatically. Parker, Parks, Parsons, and then I stopped. Patterson Ridge Development. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the folder. It was thick, heavy with documents. I looked around to make sure no one was watching. I opened it. It was a commercial loan application, a big one, millions of dollars for a new development project in North Hamilton. I scanned the pages. I saw my father's signature at the bottom of the promissory note. It was a sharp, aggressive scrawl that I knew better than my own handwriting. But something was wrong. I had grown up hearing my father talk about business. I knew that Patterson Ridge Development prided itself on liquidity. My father always bragged that he used his own capital, that he never over-leveraged. Debt is for people who do not know how to manage their money. He used to say, so why was he borrowing $3 million from a mid-sized credit union in Riverton? Why was he paying an interest rate that was 2 points higher than the market average? I turned the page. I saw the collateral list. He had put up the Briar Glen house, my childhood home, the house he had kicked me out of. I felt a strange, cold sensation in my stomach. It was the sting of being erased. Here was my family name, on a piece of paper in my hands, and yet I was a stranger to it. I was just the admin girl filing the paperwork. I was a ghost haunting my own history. Miss Patterson, I jumped. Mr. Henderson, the senior loan officer, was standing in the doorway. He was a tall, balding man with kind eyes and a penchant for bow ties. I am sorry, I said, quickly closing the folder. I was just filing this. He walked over and looked at the label on the folder. Ah, the Patterson account. Big fish for a little pond like us. Do we usually lend this much to out-of-town developers? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. You have a good eye. Stella, no, we do not, but the collateral is solid, and the guarantor is highly rated, although, he hesitated, although what I pressed. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw something in my face, maybe a hunger, maybe an intelligence that he had not noticed before. Although the cash flow projections are a bit optimistic, he said, aggressive, if they miss a single milestone, they are going to be in trouble. I looked back at the folder. I knew my father. He never missed milestones. He forced the world to meet his schedule. But if he was borrowing like this, something had changed. I would like to learn more about this, I said, about underwriting, about how you assess risk. Mr. Henderson smiled. Well, we could use some help in the analysis department. If you are interested, I could show you the ropes. I am interested, I said. That was the beginning. Mr. Henderson became my mentor. He taught me how to read a balance sheet, how to spot the cracks in a company's foundation, how to see the story hidden in the numbers. I realized that I was good at it. I was good at understanding risk because I had lived it. I knew what it felt like to have the floor drop out from under you. I knew how to look for the trapdoors. I started taking night classes at Riverton State College. I studied finance and accounting. I would put Owen to bed at 7 o'clock, and then I would sit at my small kitchen table with my textbooks, studying until my eyes burned. I learned about debt covenants. I learned about distressed assets. I learned about leverage. 7 years passed in snapshots. Owen taking his first steps on the linoleum floor of our kitchen, me, crying in the bathroom after a particularly brutal exam, wondering if I was crazy for trying to do this. Mr. Henderson retiring and giving me his old calculator, telling me that I was the sharpest analyst he had ever met. Owen starting kindergarten, walking into the classroom with a backpack that was almost as big as he was, turning back to wave at me with a smile that broke my heart and healed it all at once. Me, walking across the stage at graduation, accepting my diploma while Marcy cheered from the audience, holding a sign that said, "That is my girl." I did not go back to Briar Glen. I did not call my parents. I sent a card on Christmas and a card on their birthdays, signed simply, Stella and Owen. I never got a response. By the time I was 31, I was unrecognizable from the girl who had left that house with a single suitcase. I was a junior analyst at Greystone Meridian Partners, a boutique investment firm in the city. I wore tailored suits. I spoke in a voice that was low and steady. I knew how to walk into a room and make men listen to me. I learned that the world of high finance was not so different from the playground. It was full of bullies and cowards. But here, the weapons were not fists or cruel words. They were signatures. They were clauses in contracts. Power could be transferred quietly, without a single shout being raised. I was sitting at my desk at Greystone one rainy Tuesday morning when the email arrived. It was from a personal address. The subject line was blank. I opened it. Stella, I know we have not spoken. Mom told me you are working in finance now. I just wanted to let you know that Dad is having a hard time. Business is complicated right now. He is under a lot of stress. Please do not do anything to stir up drama. We are trying to handle things quietly. We do not need any outside interference. Hope you are well. Ava. I stared at the screen. My sister. Ava. She was 3 years older than me. She had always been the perfect one, the one who followed the rules, the one who married the right man and joined the right clubs. She did not ask about Owen. She did not ask how I was. She just wanted to make sure I stayed in my box. She wanted to make sure the liability did not come back to haunt them. Dad is having a hard time. I thought about the loan application I had seen 7 years ago. I thought about the aggressive borrowing. I thought about the silence. They still believed I was the problem. They still believed that if they just kept me away, everything would be fine. They did not realize that the rot was inside the house, and it had been there long before I got pregnant. I printed the email, I folded it neatly, and put it in my purse. I was not going to stir up drama. Drama was for children. Drama was for people who did not have a plan. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. The rain was falling hard, washing the streets clean. I did not want drama. I wanted the truth, and for the first time in 7 years, I had the tools to find it. I went back to my desk and opened the terminal. I typed in a new search command, Patterson Ridge Development. The results populated the screen, and as I scrolled through the filings, the liens, the lawsuits, I felt a cold, sharp clarity settle over me. My father was not just having a hard time, he was drowning, and I was the only one who could see the water rising. The morning sunlight hit the glass walls of the conference room at Greystone Meridian Partners, turning the dust motes into suspended gold. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, a tablet in front of me and a cup of black coffee cooling near my hand. It was the weekly distressed assets briefing, a ritual where we dissected the failures of the market with the clinical detachment of surgeons standing over a cadaver. David, the managing director, was scrolling through the slide deck. He was a man who spoke in bullet points and measured success in basis points. Next up is the regional construction sector, David said. Clicking a button, we are seeing a significant uptick in covenant breaches in the mid-Atlantic region. Supply chain costs are stabilizing, but the liquidity crunch from the last 2 quarters is finally hitting the balance sheets. I took a sip of coffee, my eyes scanning the list of companies projected on the screen. It was a standard watch list. Companies that had borrowed too much, built too fast, or simply run out of luck. Most of the names meant nothing to me. They were just tickers, data sets, opportunities to buy $1 for 60 cents. And then I saw it. It was 5th on the list, buried between a commercial logistics firm and a failing retail chain. Patterson Ridge Development. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The sound of David's voice faded into a dull buzz. I stared at the name, the letters sharp and black against the white background. My heart kicked against my ribs, a single, violent thud that echoed in my ears. Patterson Ridge. David continued, oblivious to the fact that the room had just tilted on its axis for me. This one is interesting. High-end residential developer out of Massachusetts. They have been a staple in the luxury market for decades, but their leverage ratios have spiked in the last 6 months. They missed a principal payment to Northmark Harbor Bank last week. They are currently in a forbearance period, but the clock is ticking. I kept my face perfectly still. This was the mask I had perfected over 7 years. The professional, the analyst, the woman who did not have a past, only a resume. What is the collateral? I asked. My voice was steady, calm, indistinguishable from the voice I used to order lunch. David glanced at his notes. Mostly undeveloped land in North Hamilton, and a few completed spec homes that are sitting on the market. But the real issue is the cross-collateralization. It looks messy. They have rushed some refinancing deals recently that smell like desperation. I made a note on my tablet, my stylus moving smoothly across the glass. Desperation, that was not a word that belonged in Gordon Patterson's vocabulary. My father did not get desperate. He got angry. He got vindictive. He got cruel. But he did not get desperate. If he was missing payments, if he was on a watch list at a firm like Greystone, It meant the rot was not just in the walls, it meant the foundation was cracking. I spent the rest of the meeting in a fugue state, nodding at the right times, asking the right questions about yield spreads and recovery rates. While my mind was racing back to a dining room in Briar Glen and the sound of my father's voice calling me a liability, when the meeting ended, I walked back to my office, closed the door, and lowered the blinds. I sat down at my desk and logged into the terminal. I typed in the name again, Patterson Ridge Development. I pulled every public filing I could find. I pulled the UCC financing statements. I pulled the lawsuit records. I pulled the property tax liens. It was worse than David had said. My father was not just swimming upstream, he was drowning. The pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look. 3 years ago, the company had started borrowing aggressively, not for growth, but for maintenance. He was using new debt to pay off old debt. A classic Ponzi-style churn that worked only as long as the banks were willing to look the other way. But the banks had stopped looking the other way. I focused on the loans bundled through Northmark Harbor Bank. There were 5 of them, totaling nearly $12 million. They were construction loans, but the terms were punitive. High interest, short maturity. These were not the loans of a blue-chip developer. These were the loans of a man who had been laughed out of the prime lending offices. I scrolled down to the guarantee section. In commercial lending, a personal guarantee is the blood oath. It means that if the company fails, the bank can come for everything you own: your house, your car, your savings, your retirement. Gordon Patterson had signed unlimited personal guarantees on every single note. He had bet the entire kingdom, but as I looked closer, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The guarantees were broad, strangely broad. They referenced assets that shouldn't have been involved in commercial construction loans. There were references to family trusts, references to a charitable entity. It looked as if someone had signed away more than they meant to, or perhaps someone had been so arrogant they thought they would never have to pay. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitors illuminating the dark office. It was 8 o'clock at night. The cleaning crew was vacuuming the hallway outside. Curiosity was a dangerous thing. It had led me to look at that file 7 years ago, but this was not just curiosity anymore. This was leverage. The next morning, David called me into his office. "Stella," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "I want you to take lead on a small distressed purchase. It is a good opportunity for you to get your hands dirty with the mechanics of the transaction." I sat down. "Which asset?" "It is a tranche of construction debt being offloaded by Northmark Harbor Bank," he said. "They are cleaning up their balance sheet before the quarter ends. They want to get rid of some underperforming paper. It is mostly regional stuff." My heart skipped a beat. "Northmark Harbor. Does it include the Patterson Ridge notes?" I asked. David nodded. "Yes, that is the bulk of the tranche. It is risky." "Stella. The collateral is illiquid, and the borrower is known to be litigious, but the discount is steep. If we can get it for 40 cents on the dollar, we can make a killing on the restructure, or we can force a liquidation and sell the land." He looked at me. "Do you think you can handle it?" I looked him in the eye. "I can handle it." "Good." David pushed a file across the desk. "You are not buying the company. Stella, remember that? You are buying the paper. But when you own the paper, you control the company's breathing. You decide if they get oxygen or if they suffocate. It is a delicate position. You have to be dispassionate." "Dispassionate." I took the file. "I understand." I walked back to my desk, my hands trembling slightly. I was not going to buy this debt for Greystone. If Greystone bought it, they would squeeze the company dry, liquidate the assets, and move on. They would destroy my father. Yes, but they would also destroy everything else. They would destroy the employees. They would destroy the contractors. And I did not just want destruction. I wanted accountability. I needed to buy it myself. I had money, not millions, but enough for a down payment on a leveraged buyout if I structured it correctly. I had been saving for 7 years. I had invested aggressively, and I had access to financing partners who trusted my judgment. But I could not buy it as Stella Patterson. If my father saw my name on a term sheet, He would burn the company to the ground out of spite before he let me own a single brick. I needed a vehicle. I spent the next 3 nights in my apartment. After Owen had gone to sleep, drafting the articles of incorporation for a new entity, I needed a name that sounded established but anonymous, something that sounded like old money but didn't exist. Juniper Vale. It was the name of the street where Marcy Holloway lived, the woman who had taken me in when I was broken. It sounded peaceful. It sounded safe. Juniper Vale Holdings, LLC. I wrote the operating agreement with a precision that bordered on obsession. I established strict ethical boundaries for the fund. Article 4. The company shall not engage in any collection practices that violate the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, nor shall it pursue remedies that endanger the primary residence of any minor child. Article 5. The primary objective of the company is the rehabilitation of distressed assets through restructuring and accountability, prioritizing operational solvency over liquidation. I was not going to be him. I was not going to throw people out into the street. I was not going to be a destroyer. I was going to be a corrector. I reached out to a silent partner, a former mentor from my night classes who had started a private equity fund. I pitched him the deal. I told him the financials, the risk, the potential upside. I did not tell him the borrower was my father. I told him it was an undervalued asset with a management problem. He agreed to back me. I submitted the bid to Northmark Harbor Bank through a blind trust. I used Greystone's network to legitimize the offer, presenting Juniper Vale as a specialized distressed asset firm looking for a foothold in the region. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I went through the motions at work, reviewing other files, sitting in meetings, but my mind was entirely focused on the invisible wire that connected me to my father. On Friday afternoon, I got the call. Ms. Patterson. This is the transaction coordinator at Northmark. Yes, your bid for the Tranche B portfolio has been accepted into the final round. The bank's counsel would like to meet with the representative of Juniper Vale to finalize the terms and conduct a final due diligence review. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. When Monday morning, 10 o'clock, at the offices of Cross and Larkham, I hung up the phone. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than 31. I looked like someone who had been fighting a war for a long time. You are not a liability. I told my reflection. You are the creditor. Cross and Larkham, LLP, was located in a steel and glass tower in downtown Boston. The offices were intimidating, designed to make you feel small, to remind you that the law was a heavy, expensive thing. I was led into a conference room that overlooked the harbor. The view was gray and choppy, the water reflecting the steel of the sky. A man was standing by the window. He turned as I entered. He was not what I expected. I expected an old, crusty litigator with a cigar stain on his teeth. This man was younger, maybe in his late 30s. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, but he wore it with a casual grace, as if he didn't care that it cost more than my car. He had dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that were a startling, clear gray. Ms. Patterson, he asked. His voice was deep, calm. Yes, I said, extending my hand. I am representing Juniper Vale. He took my hand. His grip was firm, dry. Evan Cross. I am counsel for Northmark Harbor. Please, have a seat. We sat opposite each other. He opened a file in front of him. He did not look at his notes. He looked at me. Juniper Vale is a new entity, he said. It is not a question. It is a special purpose vehicle formed for this acquisition, I said, reciting the line I had rehearsed. We are a private investment group focused on long-term restructuring. I see. He tapped a pen against the table. And you are the managing member I am. He studied me. His gaze was precise, dissecting. It felt less like a negotiation and more like an interrogation, but not a hostile one. It felt like he was trying to solve a puzzle. This is a messy tranche, Ms. Patterson, he said. The primary asset, Patterson Ridge, is deeply underwater. The principal, Gordon Patterson, is difficult. I kept my face blank. I have reviewed the files. Mr. Cross, we are aware of the risks. Are you— He leaned forward slightly. The bank is eager to sell. Obviously, they want this off their books. But my job is to ensure that the buyer understands what they are walking into. This is not just a financial transaction. There are personal guarantees involved that are going to be contested. It is going to get ugly. I am not afraid of ugly. Mr. Cross. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. Fair enough. He flipped open the file. There is one irregularity I need to flag before we proceed. It came up in our final audit of the loan documents. My stomach tightened. An irregularity. Yes. He pulled out a document and slid it across the table. It was a copy of a guarantee agreement. This is a secondary guarantee for the most recent loan. Evan said, $3 million. It is secured by the assets of the Patterson Civic Renewal Foundation. I frowned. I had never heard of it. The foundation. It appears to be a charitable entity controlled by the Patterson family. Evan said, the bank accepted it as collateral because the foundation holds title to several parcels of unencumbered land. I looked down at the document. I saw my father's signature, large and aggressive, and then, below it, I saw another signature. It was smaller, looped, hesitant. Elaine Patterson. My mother. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother didn't sign business documents. My mother didn't know how to balance a checkbook because Gordon didn't let her. She was a woman who arranged flowers and hosted dinners. She was terrified of money. She was terrified of him. Why is her signature here? I asked. My voice tight. Evan was watching me closely. That is the question. She is listed as the secretary of the foundation. But looking at the bylaws, he paused. It seems unusual for a charitable foundation to guarantee a commercial construction loan. It borders on self-dealing, if this goes to court. Ms. Patterson, there is a very real chance that the veil will be pierced. The foundation's assets could be seized, and if there was fraud involved in how this guarantee was obtained— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If there was fraud— My mother could be liable, or, if she signed it willingly, she was complicit in looting a charity to save my father's business. I stared at the signature. Elaine Patterson. It looked shaky. It looked like the hand of someone who had been told to sign or else. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. He had used her. He had used the woman who had stood silently by his side for 40 years, the woman he had bullied into submission. He had turned her into a shield to protect his own failures. I looked up at Evan Cross. He was not looking at the paper. He was looking at me. And in his eyes, I saw something that confused me. It wasn't the shark-like gleam of a corporate lawyer smelling blood. It was something else. Caution. Maybe even protection. Ms. Patterson, he said softly, are you all right? I realized my hand was gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. I forced myself to breathe. I forced the rage down into the cold, dark place where I kept everything else. I am fine. I said, this changes the risk profile. Evan said, if the guarantee is voidable, it does not change my position. I interrupted. He raised an eyebrow. No. I looked at the document again. I am not buying this debt to liquidate the foundation. Mr. Cross, then why are you buying it? He asked the question quietly, but it hung in the air like a blade. I looked him in the eye, because someone has to stop the bleeding. Evan held my gaze for a long silence. He was evaluating me. I could see the gears turning behind those gray eyes. He knew there was more to this. He knew I wasn't just a random investor, but he didn't know the truth. Not yet. Finally, he closed the file. Very well, he said. If you are willing to proceed with the knowledge of the potential encumbrances on the guarantee, the bank is prepared to close. I am willing, I said. He pushed a stack of documents toward me. Sign here, and here, and here. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. This was it. The moment of no return. I signed my name. Stella Patterson, managing member, Juniper Vale Holdings, LLC, with each signature. I felt the weight shifting. For 7 years, my father had held all the cards. He had the money, the house, the reputation. I had nothing. But signatures were powerful things. They were more powerful than shouting. They were more powerful than insults. I signed the last page and pushed the stack back to Evan. He checked the signatures, then looked up at me. "Congratulations, Ms. Patterson. You now own the debt of Patterson Ridge Development. Thank you, Mr. Cross." I stood up. My legs felt steady. "One word of advice," Evan said. "Standing as well." I paused. "Yes, Gordon Patterson is a man who is used to getting his way. When he finds out his paper has been sold to a third party, he is going to react poorly." "I know," I said. Evan tilted his head slightly. "Be careful. Distressed debt is a contact sport." I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. I looked at the man who had just handed me the weapon I needed to kill the monster. "I know how to handle Gordon Patterson," I said. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As the doors closed, shutting out the view of the gray harbor, I let out a long, shuddering breath. I had done it. I owned him. I walked out of the building and onto the busy street. The city was loud, chaotic, alive. People were rushing to lunch, honking horns, shouting into phones. I found a quiet bench in a small plaza and sat down. I pulled my phone out. I opened the banking app for Juniper Vale. The transfer was pending. By the end of the day, it would be done. I thought about my mother. I thought about her shaky signature on that document. Patterson Civic Renewal Foundation. I didn't even know it existed. A charity. My father didn't believe in charity. He believed in leverage. He had created a sham to hide money, or to launder it, and he had made my mother the face of it. I felt a cold resolve settle in my chest. I was not going to weaponize my mother. I was not going to let her go down with him. I was going to use this power to cut her free, and then I was going to bury him. I dialed my assistant's number at Greystone. "I am taking the afternoon off," I said. "Everything okay?" "Stella." "Yes," I said, watching a pigeon peck at a crumb on the pavement. "Everything is finally under control." I hung up. I sat there for a long time, watching the city move around me. I felt a strange sense of unreality. It was too quiet. I had expected thunder. I had expected the ground to shake. But that was the thing about financial power. It was silent. It was a line on a ledger. It was a signature on a page. I had the leverage now. The company that had thrown me away. The father who had called me a liability. The legacy that had erased me, it all belonged to me. And he didn't even know it yet. I stood up and walked toward the subway. I had to pick up Owen from school. I had to make dinner. I had to be a mother. But tomorrow, I would send the notice. Tomorrow, I would introduce myself. Tomorrow, the liability would become the liquidation. The letterhead on my screen was minimalist, elegant, and completely fabricated. Juniper Vale Holdings, LLC. It looked like old money. It looked like a firm that managed generational wealth for families who summered in Newport and wintered in Gstaad. In reality, it was a Delaware shell company I had registered 72 hours ago, and its only asset was the debt that was currently suffocating my father. I sat in my apartment, the glow of the laptop illuminating the darkness of the living room. Owen was asleep in the next room, his breathing a soft, rhythmic sound that usually calmed me. Tonight, however, my pulse was racing. I hit send. The formal notice went out to the General Counsel of Patterson Ridge Development and to Gordon Patterson directly. The language was standard creditor boilerplate, but I had sharpened the edges. Pursuant to the assignment of debt from Northmark Harbor Bank, Juniper Vale Holdings, LLC, hereby requests a full audit of current financials, including all cash flow statements and subsidiary ledgers. To be delivered within 48 hours, we further propose an immediate restructuring meeting to address the covenant breaches identified in the attached schedule. I signed it simply, Patterson, managing member. It was a gamble using my last name. Patterson was a common enough name, but in his world, there was only one Patterson that mattered. I wanted to see if he would even pause. I wanted to see if the name of the daughter he banished would register as a threat, or if his arrogance was so absolute that he would just assume I was a distant relation or a coincidence. The response came 4 hours later. It was not from the General Counsel. It was from Gordon, to whom it may concern. We are in receipt of your notice. Patterson Ridge Development has been a pillar of this community for 30 years. We do not respond to demands from secondary market vultures who do not understand the nature of our business cycles. We will provide the standard quarterly reports when they are ready. Any attempt to accelerate the debt will be met with vigorous legal defense. Do not dictate terms to me, Gordon Patterson. I read the email twice. I could hear his voice in every typed word. The booming baritone, the dismissal, vultures. Do not dictate terms. He didn't even ask who S. Patterson was. He didn't care. To him, I was just an annoyance, a fly buzzing around the head of a lion. He assumed Juniper Vale was some faceless hedge fund looking for a quick payout. He had no idea the vulture was his own blood. I closed the laptop. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard satisfaction. He was exactly who I remembered him to be. He hadn't changed. He hadn't softened, and that made what I was about to do necessary. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was at my desk at Greystone. I checked the caller ID. Ava. I stared at the screen. Ava hadn't called me in 3 years. Her communications were limited to curt emails about holiday schedules or vague updates on parents who never asked to see me. I picked up. Hello, Ava. Stella. Her voice was high, brittle. It sounded like glass about to shatter. Stella, are you at work? Can you talk? I am at work, I said, keeping my voice level. Is everything all right? No. Everything is not all right. Have you heard anything? Heard anything about what about Dad? About the business? I leaned back in my chair. Why would I hear anything about the business? Ava. I haven't stepped foot in that office in 7 years. I know. But you work in finance now. You hear things. Rumors. What kind of rumors? I asked, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. There are people. Sniffing around, she said. The word came out like a hiss. Dad is furious. He says some no-name company bought the bank debt and is trying to force an audit. He is tearing the office apart. I felt a ghost of a smile touch my lips. Juniper Vale was making waves. That sounds like standard procedure for distressed debt. Ava, if he is behind on payments, he is not behind, she snapped. Too quickly. It is just a cash flow timing issue. But these people, they are asking for things they shouldn't be asking for. Detailed ledgers, foundation records. I froze. Foundation records. Why would a creditor care about the foundation? I asked. Feigning ignorance, isn't that a separate entity? It is supposed to be, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But Dad, look, Stella, I need to know. If these people start digging, how deep can they go? Can they look at personal accounts? Can they look at expenses? I realized then that Ava wasn't calling to warn me. She wasn't calling to protect our father. She was calling to protect herself. Ava, I said slowly, what did you do? Nothing, I didn't do anything, but I am on the board. Stella, I am the vice president of the foundation. If Dad did something messy, if he moved money around, am I liable? So that was it, the loyal daughter, the one who stayed, the one who married the right man and wore the right clothes. She was terrified. She had enjoyed the prestige of the Patterson name, but she had no stomach for the cost. If you signed the documents, Ava, you are liable. I said coldly, that is how it works. There was a silence on the other end, a long, terrified silence. You have to tell me if you hear anything, she whispered. Please, Stella, I have kids. I can't be dragged into a lawsuit. I have a kid too. Ava, I said, remember? She didn't answer. She just hung up. I stared at the phone. The cracks were spreading. Gordon was raging. Ava was panicking. The facade of the perfect Patterson family was crumbling. And all I had done was send one letter. That evening, I met Evan Cross at a coffee shop in the financial district. It was far enough away from Greystone and his firm that we wouldn't be seen by colleagues. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a file folder in front of him. He looked tired. "Mr. Cross," I said. "Sitting down." "Evan," he corrected. "Please. If we are going to do this, we should drop the formalities." "Evan," then. He took a sip of his coffee. "I received a copy of your demand letter." "Stella." Your father's response was spirited. "He is consistent." I said. Evan nodded. He tapped the file folder. "I asked you to meet me because I have been doing some digging of my own. As counsel for the bank, my primary duty is to recover the principal, but I have an ethical obligation not to facilitate fraud." "Fraud?" I asked. He opened the folder. He slid a spreadsheet across the table. "This is a summary of the transaction flow between Patterson Ridge Development and the Patterson Civic Renewal Foundation over the last 18 months. He said. I looked at the numbers. They were dizzying. Transfers of $50,000, $100,000, labeled as consulting fees or community grants. I went to the foundation's website. Evan continued. It is full of photos of black tie galas in Briar Glen. Champagne, caviar, silent auctions. They claim to support underprivileged youth in the state. And then look at the tax returns," he said. I looked at the second document he slid over. The declared charitable giving for the last fiscal year was $12,000. $12,000. I repeated. Out of how much revenue? Nearly $2 million flowed into that foundation last year. Evan said. Where did the rest go? I traced the lines on the spreadsheet. Consulting fees paid to a shell company in the Caymans. Event planning fees paid to a company registered to Ava Patterson. It is a slush fund. I said. My voice was flat. It looks like it, Evan said. He is moving money out of the development company, funneling it through the foundation to hide it from creditors, and then pulling it out for personal use, or family use. Public virtue masking private desperation, I murmured. Evan looked at me. His gray eyes were intense. This is why I flagged your mother's guarantee. Stella, if the foundation is a sham, and she is the secretary, she is walking into a felony. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My mother, she doesn't know. I said, I know that sounds naive, but she doesn't. She signs what he puts in front of her. She always has. Ignorance is not a legal defense for a corporate officer. Evan said gently. I know that. I looked up at him. That is why I need to get to her before the regulators do. Evan sat back. What are you planning? I need to see the original documents. I said, not the digital copies. I need to see the wet signatures. And I need to talk to her. You are going to Briar Glen. Yes. It is risky. Stella. If Gordon sees you, he won't see me. He is too busy fighting the vultures to notice the mouse in the house. I took the train to Briar Glen the next Saturday. I didn't drive my car. I didn't want the license plate to be spotted. I walked from the station, the familiar streets rising up to meet me like a bad dream. The town hadn't changed. It was still aggressively perfect. The lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. The fences were white and gleaming. It was a town that screamed, everything is fine here, so loudly it felt suspicious. I walked past the high school I had attended. I walked past the park where I had told Nate I was pregnant. I walked until I stood across the street from the house, 42 Crestwood Drive. It was a sprawling colonial with black shutters and a circular driveway. My father's Mercedes was gone. He was at the office, fighting his war, but my mother's car was there. I stood on the sidewalk, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets. I felt my body remember the humiliation. I could feel the ghost of the suitcase handle in my hand. I could feel the cold wind on my face from that night 7 years ago. I wasn't here for reconciliation. I didn't want a hug. I didn't want an apology that would never come. I was here for evidence. I didn't go to the door. I knew my mother's routine. On Saturdays, she went to the French bakery on Main Street at 10 o'clock for tea and a scone. It was her only escape, her only hour of autonomy. I walked to the bakery and waited at a table in the back. She walked in at 10:15. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was still perfectly dyed a soft blonde, but her shoulders were hunched. She wore a wool coat that looked expensive but heavy, as if it were weighing her down. She ordered her tea and sat down 2 tables away from me. She didn't look around. She just stared into her cup. I stood up and walked over. "Mom," she jumped, spilling a little tea onto the saucer. She looked up, her eyes widening behind her reading glasses. "Stella," she whispered. "Hello, Mom." She looked around frantically, as if she expected Gordon to burst through the door. "What? What are you doing here?" I sat down opposite her. "I need to talk to you." "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, leaning in. "If your father knows—" "He won't know," I said, "unless you tell him." She looked at me, really looked at me. She took in my suit, my hair, the way I held myself. I wasn't the crying girl she had watched leave. "You look good," she said, her voice trembling. "You look grown up. It has been 7 years. Mom, I am 31. How is the boy?" "His name is Owen," I said sharply, "and he is fine. He is smart. He is happy." She looked down at her hands. "I am glad. I am so glad." We sat in silence for a moment. The air between us was thick with things unsaid. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice low, "I need to ask you about the foundation." Her head snapped up. "The foundation, why?" "Because I know about the guarantee." I said, "I know you signed a guarantee for a $3 million loan using the foundation's assets." She turned pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. I sign a lot of papers. Gordon handles the business. Gordon is in trouble. Mom, real trouble. And he has dragged you into it." "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, he is just stressed. The market is hard. He told me it is just a rough patch. He made you sign a personal guarantee." I said, "Do you know what that means? It means if he defaults, the bank takes the assets. They take the land. They take the money. And because you are the secretary, they could come after you for fraud." "Fraud?" Her voice cracked. I would never do anything illegal. I know you wouldn't do it on purpose, but signing something you don't understand is dangerous." She started to cry then. Silent, terrified tears that tracked through her powder. "He just puts them in front of me," she whispered. "At breakfast, he says, 'Sign here. Elaine, it is for the tax write-off. Sign here. It is for the renewal.' I don't read them. If I read them, he gets angry. He says I don't trust him. And do you?" I asked. "Do you trust him?" She didn't answer. She just wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I tried to help," she said suddenly. "What I tried to help you, the checks." I frowned. "What checks?" "For the last 5 years," she said. "I sent money. I didn't want Gordon to know. I gave cash to Aunt Martha, and she bought cashier's checks. She sent them to the address we found online. $500 here, $200 there. It wasn't much. I couldn't take more out of the household account without him noticing." I stared at her. The anonymous money orders. Every few months, I would receive a plain white envelope with a cashier's check. No note. No return address. I had assumed they were from Nate's parents. Guilt money for their son's abandonment. I had used them for groceries. For Owen's winter coats. "That was you?" I asked. She nodded. "I wanted to send more. I wanted to call. But he forbade it. He said you were dead to us until you apologized. And you listened." I said. The anger flared up, hot and bright. "You listened to him. You let him erase me. And you sent me scraps of cash like I was a beggar. It was all I could do," she pleaded. "I was scared. Stella, I am still scared." I looked at her terrified face. My anger didn't vanish, but it shifted. It became heavy, like wet sand. It was a mix of pity and disgust, and a deep, aching sadness. She was a prisoner in her own life. She had traded her voice for security, and now she had neither. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "I need you to look at this," I said. I opened the folder and placed a copy of the guarantee document on the table. "This is the document Evan Cross flagged. It is the guarantee for the Northmark loan." Elaine looked at it. She traced her own signature. Yes, she said, that is my writing. I remember signing this one. He said it was for the community park project. Okay, I said. Now look at the bottom. I pointed to the second signature line. It was a guarantor signature. Stella Patterson. The date was 7 years ago. April. 2 weeks before I was kicked out. Elaine gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. I stared at the signature. It looked like my handwriting. It had the same loop on the P, the same sharp slant on the T, but I hadn't signed it. In April of that year, I was vomiting in the bathroom and trying to hide my pregnancy. I wasn't signing loan guarantees for a company I didn't work for. That is your name. Elaine whispered. Yes. Did you sign this? No, Mom. I didn't. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with horror. Then who? We both knew the answer. Gordon didn't just kick me out. He didn't just disown me. He used me. He stole my identity before he exiled me. He needed a second guarantor for some reason, maybe to meet a diversity quota for a specific loan type. Maybe because he needed a family member with a clean credit history. Even if I had no assets, he had forged my name, binding me to his debt at the exact moment he was calling me a liability. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just financial abuse. It was a crime, a felony. He did this, Elaine whispered. He did this to you? I took the paper back. I felt cold all over. Does anyone else know? She asked. The bank suspects. I said. The lawyer suspects. What are you going to do? I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes. But I also saw a flicker of something else. Shame. She was finally seeing him clearly. I'm going to fix it. I said, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Do not tell him I was here. Do not tell him we spoke. If he knows I know, he will destroy the evidence. He will shred everything. I won't tell him, she said. I swear. I stood up. I left $5 on the table for her tea. Goodbye. Mom. Stella. I turned back. He is sick, she said. Not physically, but inside. He has been sick for a long time. I know. I said. I walked out of the bakery and into the cold wind. I walked back to the train station. My hands were shaking, but my mind was razor sharp. I called Evan from the platform. Evan, Stella, how did it go? I need to see you. Tonight. Are you okay? You sound... He forged it. Evan, I said the words out loud, and they tasted like ash. The signature is a forgery, but it is not just a random forgery. He used my name. He used me as a guarantor 7 years ago, right before he kicked me out. There was a long silence on the line. Jesus, Evan breathed. I am looking at the copy. I said, it is dated April 12th. I was living in his house then. I was pregnant. I was terrified. And he was using my social security number to secure a loan. Stella, listen to me, Evan said, his voice urgent. This changes everything. This is identity theft. This is bank fraud. If we take this to the authorities now, he goes to prison, immediately. I know. But, Evan continued, if we blow this up now, the bank will freeze everything. The assets will be seized. The foundation will be audited publicly. Your mother. She will be dragged into the deposition. The press will have a field day. Daughter sends father to prison. It will be a circus. I closed my eyes. I could see the headlines. I could see Owen seeing his grandfather's face on the news in handcuffs. I could see my mother collapsing under the weight of the questions. I don't want a circus, I said. Then we have to be smart. Evan said. We have to keep this inside the restructuring process. For now. What are you proposing? I can launch an internal verification inquiry, he said, quietly. Under the guise of standard due diligence, we hire a handwriting expert, we get a definitive forensic report, we build the case so tight that he can't wiggle out of it, but we keep it sealed until you are ready to pull the trigger. And in the meantime, you proceed with Juniper Vale. You squeeze him, you force the meeting, you make him sweat. You let him think it is just business. And when he walks into that room, you don't just hit him with debt, you hit him with the felony. I looked down the tracks. The train was approaching. a silver bullet cutting through the gray afternoon. It was the cleaner way. It was the surgical way. It would keep Owen safe. It would give me time to figure out how to protect my mother. "Okay," I said. "We keep it clean," Evan asked. "We keep it clean," I said. "Until the end." I hung up the phone. I boarded the train and sat by the window. I watched Briar Glen disappear behind me. I had gone there looking for records. I had found a crime. My father had called me a liability. He had said I would ruin the family name. But he was the one who had stolen my name. He had taken the one thing that was truly mine, my identity, and twisted it to serve his greed. I touched the glass of the window. It was cold. He thought he was safe. He thought he had erased me. He was about to find out that the name he stole was the name that would end him. The video feed on my laptop screen was high definition, crisp enough to see the beads of sweat forming on Miles Tarrant's hairline. I was sitting in my apartment in Riverton, the blinds drawn, a cup of lukewarm tea untouched beside me. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. On the screen, my father, Gordon Patterson, was walking through the open-plan office of Patterson Ridge Development in Linden Harbor. He was wearing a navy suit that cost more than my first car, and he was smiling. It was the smile I knew better than my own reflection, the one that stopped at his mouth, never reaching his eyes. "We are completely transparent here," Gordon was saying to the camera. He was speaking to the 2 forensic auditors I had sent, representatives of Juniper Vale who were wearing body cameras. "We believe in open books. The liquidity issues are merely seasonal. You know how the construction cycle works in New England. Winter slows the pores. Spring brings the cash." He gestured grandly to the rows of cubicles where employees were working with their heads down. They looked terrified. They typed with a frantic intensity, as if stopping would invite a lightning strike. I watched him perform. He was charming. He was authoritative. He was the benevolent patriarch of a thriving empire. If I didn't know he was insolvent, I might have believed him. That was his gift. He could sell sand to a man dying of thirst and convince him it was water. The auditors, instructed to be polite but invasive, followed him into the main conference room. Miles Tarrant, the chief financial officer, was waiting there. Miles was a small, nervous man who had been with the company for 15 years. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month. Gordon took the seat at the head of the table. The camera angle shifted as one of the auditors sat down across from him. "Let us discuss the covenant breach," the auditor said. His voice was calm, dispassionate. "Specifically, the transfer of funds to the Patterson Civic Renewal Foundation. We show $3 million moving out of the operating account in the last quarter." Gordon didn't flinch. He waved a hand dismissively. "That is an intercompany loan. Perfectly standard. The foundation manages our community outreach. We are building a park in North Hamilton. It is part of the zoning requirement. We have reviewed the zoning applications," the auditor replied. "There is no park requirement, and the foundation has not disbursed any funds for construction." The room went silent. I leaned closer to the screen. This was the moment. The lie had hit the wall of fact. Gordon turned his head slowly toward Miles Tarrant. The charm vanished. His face didn't twist into rage. It went blank, cold and hard as granite. It was the face he had worn the night he told me to pack my bags. "Miles," Gordon said softly, "did you not update the zoning file for the auditors?" Miles stammered. I thought we were waiting on the amended variances." "Gordon, I didn't want to release incomplete data." Gordon smiled, but it was a terrifying thing. Incomplete data. "You are making us look incompetent. Miles, you are making us look like we are hiding things." He wasn't yelling. He was speaking in a register that vibrated with threat. He was humiliating his CFO in front of strangers to deflect from his own fraud. He was using Miles as a shield. "I apologize, gentlemen," Gordon said, turning back to the auditors. "My CFO seems to be struggling with the details today. We will have that documentation for you by end of day. Miles, perhaps you should go and find it. Now." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. Miles scrambled to gather his papers. His hands shaking so badly he dropped a pen. He ducked his head and hurried out of the room. I watched Gordon watch him go. There was a flicker of contempt in my father's eyes, a look of pure disgust for weakness. My stomach churned. I closed the laptop. I had wondered, in the quiet moments of the last 7 years, if age might have softened him. I had wondered if the silence of the house, the absence of his daughter, might have chipped away at his armor. But watching him bully Miles Tarrant confirmed the cold truth. Power hadn't softened him. It had sharpened him. He had honed his cruelty into a business tactic. He was not a man who could be reasoned with. He was a man who had to be dismantled. Later that afternoon, I met Evan Cross at a diner on the outskirts of Riverton. It was a neutral ground, far from the polished boardrooms of Boston and the manicured streets of Briar Glen. Evan slid into the booth opposite me. He looked grim. I reviewed the footage from the audit. I said, "He is stonewalling. He is throwing his staff under the bus to buy time." Evan nodded. "That is expected, but that is not why I asked to see you." He placed a thick manila envelope on the table. It was sealed with red tape. During the discovery phase for the guarantee verification, my team pulled archived vendor contracts from 7 years ago. Evan said, "We were looking for patterns in how he pays his consultants. We found this. What is it?" "It is a settlement agreement," Evan said. "Sealed, non-disclosure attached. It was filed under a miscellaneous legal expense category." I picked up the envelope. My hands felt cold. "Open it," Evan said gently. I broke the seal. I pulled out the document. It was a standard settlement and release form, dated June of the year I left. The payout was $10,000. I scanned the names. Patterson Ridge Development. Payer, Nathaniel Keller. Payee, the air left my lungs. Nate. I read the terms. In exchange for the sum of $10,000, payee agrees to cease all contact with Stella Patterson and to refrain from making any public statements regarding his employment or personal association with the Patterson family. Payee further agrees to resign his position at Apex Landscaping immediately. I stared at the signature. Nate's signature. It was messy, scrawled in blue ink. "He paid him," I whispered. Evan nodded. "Nate was working for the landscaping company that serviced the Patterson developments. Your father didn't just scare him off. Stella. He bought him. $10,000. That was the price of my heartbreak. That was the value Nate had placed on us. On me. On his unborn son." I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a burning, white-hot anger. I had spent 7 years thinking Nate was just a coward. I had thought he was young and overwhelmed, but he had taken money. He had signed a contract to abandon us. He was weak. Evan said. I looked into the background. Nate had some debts, student loans, credit cards, your father's fixer. A man named Derek Voss approached him. They likely threatened to bury him in legal fees if he didn't sign, and then offered the cash as a lifeline. Derek Voss. I knew the name. He was my father's consultant, the man who handled zoning disputes and union negotiations, the man who made problems disappear. So Gordon orchestrated it, I said, my voice trembling. He didn't just kick me out. He made sure I had no one to turn to. He isolated me completely. He wanted you to break, Evan said. He wanted you to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. He wanted to prove that you couldn't survive without him. But I didn't break. I said, I survived. I looked at the document again. I need to see him. I said, Gordon? Nate. Nate Keller still lived in Riverton. He worked as a shift manager at a hardware store now. I knew this because I had looked him up once, years ago, in a moment of weakness, and then never looked again. I waited for him in the parking lot after his shift ended at 6 o'clock. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the asphalt. I leaned against the hood of my car, the settlement document folded in my pocket. He walked out wearing a red vest over a plaid shirt. He looked older. He had gained weight, and his hairline was receding. He looked ordinary. He looked like a man who watched football on Sundays and complained about the price of gas. Nate, I said. He stopped. He squinted at me in the fading light. He took a step closer, and then he froze. Stella. Hello? Nate. He looked around nervously. as if he expected a trap. "What are you doing here? I haven't seen you in 7 years." I said, "Yeah, 7 years. You look different. Rich. I am not rich. Nate, I am just employed." He shifted his weight. "Look, Stella, if this is about child support, I don't have much. I am barely making rent. It is not about money." I said, "I don't want your money." Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the copy of the settlement. I held it out to him. "I want to know about this." Nate looked at the paper. His face went pale. He didn't reach for it. He knew what it was. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "That is supposed to be sealed." "I have access to a lot of things now." I said, $10,000. Nate. That was it. That was what we were worth. He flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Stella, you don't understand. Then explain it to me." He rubbed his face with his hands. He looked exhausted. A deep, spiritual exhaustion. "Your dad. He is a monster. Stella, you know that. After he kicked you out, this guy came to see me. Voss. Derek Voss. He came to my job. He came to my parents' house. And he told me that if I tried to see you, your dad would sue me for harassment. He said he would sue my parents. He said he would make sure I never worked in this town again. He said he had lawyers who could keep me in court until I was 80. I stared at him. I could hear Derek Voss's voice smooth, reptilian, delivering threats like they were weather reports. I was 24. "Stella." Nate pleaded. "I was a landscaper. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I was scared. My mom was sick. We couldn't handle that kind of pressure. So you took the check." He put the check on the table. Nate said, his voice cracking. He said it was a relocation fee. He said if I signed, they would leave me alone. If I didn't, he said they would destroy me. He looked at me, his eyes wet. I was weak. "Stella, I know that. I have known that every day for 7 years. I wanted to call you, 1,000 times. I wanted to call, but I signed the paper. I thought maybe you were better off without me. I thought maybe your dad would take you back if I was gone." "He wouldn't." I said softly, "I know that now." I looked at the man who was the father of my child. I looked for the anger, the fire that had propelled me through so many lonely nights, but I couldn't find it. All I felt was a hollow sadness. He wasn't a villain. He was just collateral damage. He was a small bug that had been crushed under Gordon Patterson's boot because he happened to be in the way. Gordon had done this. My father had systematically dismantled my support system to force me into submission. It was tactical. It was military. It was evil. "Do you want to see him?" I asked. "Who, Owen? Your son?" Nate looked at me, stunned. "Can I hesitated. I thought about Owen, safe in his bed, believing his father was just a story, a blank space in his life. Bringing Nate in now, this broken, guilt-ridden man, would confuse him. It would bring chaos into the stable world I had built. "Not yet," I said. Nate slumped, accepting the judgment. "Okay, but I need you to do something for me." I said, "Anything. I might need you to testify. Not about us. About Voss. About the threat. About the payoff." He looked terrified. "Against your dad?" "Yes. He will kill me." "Stella." "No." I said, "He won't, because this time, I am the one holding the gun. Will you do it?" Nate looked at the ground, then he looked at me. He nodded slowly. "I owe you that much," he said. I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I drove home in silence. My heart felt bruised, heavy. The betrayal was layered, complex. Nate had failed me, yes. But Gordon had hunted me. He had used his wealth to ensure that his own pregnant daughter would be alone in the world. I walked into my apartment. The babysitter was watching TV on the couch. I paid her and sent her home. I went into Owen's room. He was sleeping on his side, one arm thrown over his head. He looked so much like me. He had my chin, my stubborn brow, but he had Nate's ears. I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. "I am sorry," I whispered. I am sorry your grandfather is a monster. I am sorry your father was weak. But I am here, and I am enough. I would keep this war away from him. I would not let the poison of the Patterson legacy touch this room. The next day, the phone rang again. Stella. It was Ava. Her voice was even lower than before. A hushed whisper. I can't talk long. She said, I am in the car. I have to pick up the kids from soccer. What is it? Ava. I found something. I sat up straighter in my chair. What did you find? Emails, she said. Between Dad and Derek Voss. And me. You? I was copied on them. Stella. I didn't read them half the time. I just archived them. But I went back and looked. They talk about the foundation. They talk about moving the liquidity. They talk about donations that were actually loans from the company, routed back to pay for personal guarantees. My heart hammered. That was the smoking gun. That was proof of commingling funds. That was proof of piercing the corporate veil. I need copies. Ava. I can't just give them to you, she hissed. If I give them to you, I am implicating myself. I am on the email chain. Then what do you want? I want a deal. I closed my eyes. Of course. A transaction. What kind of deal, I asked. Immunity, she said. If I give you the emails, can you promise that Juniper Vale won't sue me personally? Can you promise that my assets, my house, the kids' trust funds will be safe? You want me to protect your lifestyle in exchange for the truth? I want you to protect your nephews, she cried. I didn't know. Stella, I knew he was moving money, but I didn't know it was illegal. I just did what he told me. I planned the galas. I smiled for the photos. I built my life on this. Stella, I can't lose everything. I can't end up like me. I finished for her. She went silent. Like you, she whispered. I felt a surge of bitterness. Ava had spent 7 years enjoying the fruits of the poison tree. She had built her social status, her perfect suburban life, on the foundation of our father's fraud. She had been the public face of his charity, wearing gowns bought with stolen money, accepting applause for donations that didn't exist. And now she wanted a lifeboat. I can't give you full legal immunity. Ava, I said, I am a creditor, not a prosecutor, but what? But if you cooperate fully, if you provide the emails and testify that you acted under duress and without full knowledge, I can structure the restructuring agreement to exclude the Foundation's officers from personal liability for the civil debt. You can do that, I can. If I own the debt, I decide who I sue. And you won't sue me. Not if you give me everything. I heard her let out a shaky breath. Okay. I will put them on a flash drive. I can't email them. Their IT guy monitors everything. Meet me tomorrow, I said. The library in Riverton. Backstacks. Noon. Okay. Stella. What, he is losing it. Dad. He is screaming at walls. He thinks there is a spy in the office. There is a spy. I said, you. I hung up. I met with Evan an hour later. I told him about Ava's offer. It is good leverage, Evan said, tapping his pen on the desk. The emails will prove the fraud. But we have to be careful. Careful of what, if we push too hard, too fast, Evan said. Gordon will file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I frowned. He would surrender. It is not surrender. Stella, it is a shield. If he files Chapter 11, an automatic stay goes into effect. All creditor actions stop. No more audits, no more demands. The court takes over. And in the chaos of a bankruptcy filing, evidence has a way of disappearing. Servers get wiped, files get misplaced. Derek Voss will have time to clean up the tracks. So we can't corner him yet, I said, not completely. We need to lure him into a trap. We need to offer him a way out that looks safer than bankruptcy, but actually tightens the noose. I nodded. I understood the strategy. We had to play on his arrogance. We had to make him believe he could still win. We send a restructuring proposal, I said. Evan opened his laptop. What terms? I leaned forward. We offer to extend the maturity on the notes. We lower the interest rate. We give him breathing room. He will take that, Evan said. That is a gift. But, I continued, There are conditions. 3 of them. Go on. 1 full transparency. A complete, line-by-line audit by an independent firm of our choosing. Redfern and Holt Advisory. They are sharks. Evan noted. They will find every penny. 2 Derek Voss is removed from any role in the company. Formal or informal. No more consulting fees. No more fixers. Gordon won't like that. Voss is his right hand. And 3? I said, Gordon remains CEO, but he cedes voting control of the board to an oversight committee appointed by the creditor until the debt is satisfied. Evan whistled low. You are asking him to give up the crown to save the kingdom. Exactly. I said, if he accepts, we own him. We have the audit, we have the board, we have the company. We can expose the fraud methodically from the inside. And if he refuses, he looks unreasonable to the court if he tries to file for bankruptcy later. We offered him a lifeline, and he slapped it away. It strengthens our position to force an involuntary liquidation. It is a good play, Evan said, but he will hate it. He will hate being ordered around by a faceless LLC. That is the point. I said, I want him to hate it. I want him to be so blinded by his ego that he makes a mistake. We drafted the proposal that afternoon. It was a document of beautiful, terrifying legalese. It offered salvation, but the price was submission. We sent it at 4 o'clock. I sat in my office at Greystone. Watching the clock, I knew how he would receive it. He would be in his office, drinking scotch, staring at the rain against the window. He would read the terms. He would see the demand to remove Voss. He would see the demand to give up voting control. His phone would ring. He would scream at his lawyers. At 5:30, the response came. It wasn't an email this time. It was a formal letter from his general counsel, but the tone was pure Gordon. To the management of Juniper Vale Holdings. Your proposal is insulting and unacceptable. Patterson Ridge Development is a family-owned enterprise. We do not cede control to predatory lenders. We do not fire trusted consultants at the whim of paper pushers. We reject your terms in their entirety. We will secure refinancing elsewhere. Do not contact us again with such ludicrous demands. Gordon Patterson. I read the letter and smiled. He had taken the bait. He had refused the lifeline. He had doubled down on his pride. He thought he could secure refinancing elsewhere, but he didn't know that I had already flagged his credit profile with every major lender in the state. The market was closed to him. He was trapped in a burning building, and he had just locked the exit because he didn't like the color of the door. I forwarded the rejection to Evan. He refused. I typed. Evan replied instantly. Then we proceed to phase 2. We call the default. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. The trap was set. The emails from Ava would secure the fraud charge. The testimony from Nate would secure the coercion charge, and the refusal to restructure would secure the liquidation. I had him. But as I sat there, in the silence of the empty office, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, grinding exhaustion. I was destroying my father. I was blackmailing my sister. I was using my ex-boyfriend as a witness. I was doing exactly what Gordon Patterson would have done. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked at my reflection in the glass. Don't become him. I told myself, do this for justice. Do this for Owen. But don't become him. The face in the glass stared back, hard and unyielding. I turned away. Phase 2 began tomorrow. The email I sent to Patterson Ridge Development was not emotional. It was a single page attached as a PDF, titled simply, Notice of Default and Acceleration. It was the nuclear option in the world of distressed debt. It stated that because the borrower had rejected the restructuring proposal and failed to cure the covenant breaches, Juniper Vale Holdings was exercising its right to call the entire loan due immediately, $12 million, payable within 72 hours. I sat in my apartment, watching the rain streak against the window, knowing exactly what was happening in the executive suite in Linden Harbor. I knew the panic that was currently sucking the air out of the room. Gordon Patterson did not have $12 million. He didn't have $2 million. He was asset-rich in theory, but cash-poor in reality, and I had just put a lock on his liquidity. He did exactly what I expected him to do. He scrambled. My industry sources told me he spent the morning burning up the phone lines. He called Westgate Capital Lending. He called the private equity desks in Boston. He called the hard money lenders who charged predatory rates in exchange for speed. But the market is a small village, and word travels fast. I had already ensured that the Whisper network knew Patterson Ridge was toxic, over-leveraged. The Whispers said, possible fraud in the guarantee chain, litigation pending. By noon, Gordon had been rejected by every lender in the state. The doors were closed. The well was dry. At 2:00, my phone rang. It was not Gordon. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a Boston area code. "This is Stella Patterson." I answered. "Ms. Patterson, this is Pamela Stroud. I am representing Gordon Patterson and Patterson Ridge Development in the matter of the Juniper Vale dispute." I stiffened. Pamela Stroud. I knew the name. She wasn't a corporate attorney. She was a litigator. She was a shark who specialized in high-stakes intimidation. Gordon wasn't trying to negotiate anymore. He was trying to kill the messenger. "Ms. Stroud," I said, keeping my voice cool. "I assume you are calling to arrange the wire transfer for the full principal amount." Pamela let out a low, dry laugh. It sounded like sandpaper rubbing together. "I am calling to tell you that we are filing a motion for an emergency injunction. Ms. Patterson, we are also preparing a countersuit against Juniper Vale Holdings for tortious interference and predatory lending practices. Those are baseless accusations." I said. "Are they?" Pamela asked. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming conversational, almost friendly. "We have investigators looking into Juniper Vale. Ms. Patterson, it is a shell company. No website, no history, just a PSO box in Delaware and a single managing member. That is a standard investment vehicle structure," I replied. "Perhaps, but my client believes that Juniper Vale is acting with malicious intent to devalue his company for a hostile takeover, and we intend to find out who is really behind it. We are going to depose you. Ms. Patterson, we are going to subpoena your emails, your phone records, your bank statements. We are going to drag the principal of Juniper Vale into the light." She paused to let the threat hang in the air. "If you value your privacy," she said softly, "I suggest you withdraw the default notice and accept a reasonable payment plan. Otherwise, we will make your name famous in all the wrong ways." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Exposure, legally. I was safe. Juniper Vale had done nothing wrong. But personally, if my identity came out before the final meeting, if Gordon found out his vulture was his daughter, he wouldn't just fight me in court. He would destroy me in the press. He would paint me as the vindictive, estranged daughter trying to ruin the family business out of spite. He would weaponize the narrative. I took a steadying breath. "Ms. Stroud," I said, "your client signed a contract. The debt is valid. The default is real. If you file a motion, we will respond with the forensic audit results." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hand was shaking. He was fighting dirty. He was scared. And a scared animal bites. I needed to see Evan. I met him an hour later at the back of a quiet library in Cambridge, far away from where Pamela Stroud's investigators might be looking. Evan looked tired. He had dark circles under his gray eyes, and his tie was loosened. "Stroud called me," I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. "She is threatening to unmask Juniper Vale." Evan nodded grimly. "I know. She sent a preservation letter to my firm this morning. She is going for the jugular. Stella, she wants to pierce the LLC veil and make this personal. Can she do it?" "It is difficult," Evan said, "but not impossible. If she can convince a judge that Juniper Vale is an alter ego used to commit fraud, which is ridiculous. But she is a good storyteller, she might get discovery. And once she gets discovery, she gets your name." I rub my temples. "If she gets my name. Gordon spins the story. I become the villain." Evan looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in his face. "There is something else you need to know," he said. We found a clause in the original loan agreement with Northmark Harbor, the one your father signed 7 years ago." I waited. It is an indemnification clause regarding the verification of guarantors, Evan said slowly. Basically, if it turns out that the bank failed to properly verify the identity of a guarantor, if they accepted a forged signature without due diligence, the bank could be liable for negligence. I stared at him. Negligence. I repeated, yes. If we prove the forgery, Gordon is guilty of fraud, but Northmark Harbor, my client, could be sued by the other investors in the tranche for failing to catch it. They could be on the hook for millions in damages. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. That is why you are helping me, I said. Evan didn't look away. It is part of the reason, yes. My firm needs this resolved quietly. We need you to force a restructuring that cleans up the mess without triggering a massive lawsuit that drags the bank down. If this goes public, if Pamela Stroud screams about forgeries in open court, Northmark looks incompetent, or complicit. I leaned back in my chair. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. I am a pawn, I said. You are not protecting me. Evan, you are protecting the bank. You are using me to clean up their sloppy underwriting. Evan leaned forward. His voice was urgent. I am protecting both of you. Stella, yes, the bank has exposure. But that doesn't change the fact that your father stole your identity. It doesn't change the fact that he is dangerous. Our interests align. We both need him stopped. We both need the truth to come out. But we need it to come out in a controlled room, not on the front page of the Boston Globe. I looked at him. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to storm out. But I was an analyst. I dealt in realities, not ideals. And the reality was that I needed Evan. He was the only person inside the machine who was willing to give me the ammunition I needed. Fine, I said. Our interests align, for now. But the conflict gnawed at me. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting to keep a lid on a container that was about to explode. I was walking a tightrope between exposing the truth and burying it to save my own skin. That evening, my phone rang again. It was my mother. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Mom, I said. Mom, breathe. What is happening? He is shouting. She sobbed. He is throwing things. He says I ruined us. What? He says I signed the papers wrong. She choked out. He says I didn't read the fine print on the foundation documents. He is telling Ava that it is my fault the bank is calling the loan. He says I was too stupid to understand what I was doing. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. He was rewriting history. He was gaslighting her in real time. He knew exactly what he had done. He had coerced her. He had used her, but now that the walls were closing in, he needed a scapegoat, and he was choosing the person least likely to fight back. He is lying. Mom, I said fiercely. He is lying to cover his own tracks. You did nothing wrong. I am scared. Stella, she whispered. He says we are going to lose the house. He says we will be on the street. I closed my eyes. The house, the sprawling colonial in Briar Glen. It was a symbol of her prison, but it was also her only security. It was the only world she knew. Listen to me, I said. You are not going to lose the house. How can you know? Because I can stop it. I hesitated. I was about to cross a line. I was about to mix the personal with the professional in a way that violated every rule of the game. Mom, I said, if it comes to that, if the bank takes the house, I can buy it. When I have money, I can set up a trust. I can buy the house from the bank and let you live there. Life estate. It would be yours. He couldn't touch it. He couldn't kick you out. There was silence on the line. You would do that, she asked. Yes. But with what money? Does it matter, I asked. I am offering you a safety net. Mom, I am offering you a way out of his control. I heard her breathing. Quick, shallow breaths. I can't, she whispered. Why not? It would look like charity. And if he found out I took help from you, he would hate me. He already hates you, I wanted to scream. He is already destroying you. But I didn't scream. I realized then that the chains binding her to him were not just financial. They were forged of pride and shame. She would rather sink with the captain than grab the life raft thrown by the daughter she had abandoned. "Mom," I said gently, "think about it. Please, I have to go." She said, "He is coming upstairs." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone. Love can be paralyzed by pride. She was drowning, and she was refusing to swim because she was afraid of getting her hair wet. The next morning, the situation spiraled. I woke up to a Google alert on my phone. Local blogger exposes creditor tactics in Patterson Ridge dispute. My heart stopped. I clicked the link. It was a post on the Riverton Ledger, a small business blog run by a failed journalist who loved scandal. Sources close to the Patterson family reveal that a shadow company, Juniper Vale Holdings, is attempting a hostile takeover of the beloved local developer Patterson Ridge. Documents leaked to this reporter show that Juniper Vale is using aggressive legal maneuvers to force a liquidity crisis. There was a photo of a document. It was a redacted email from Juniper Vale to the foundation. Ava. She had leaked it. She had panicked. She thought that by painting me as the villain in the press, she could force me to back off. She thought she was being clever. She was an idiot. She didn't understand how markets worked. She didn't understand that fragility hates sunlight. By 10 o'clock, the news had spread to the trade publications. By 11 o'clock, the contractors at the Patterson Ridge sites in North Hamilton stopped working. They saw the words liquidity crisis and hostile takeover, and they knew what that meant. They weren't getting paid. I got a call from my contact at the site. "It is a ghost town." "Stella," he said, "the plumbers walked off. The electricians are packing up. The supply trucks turned around at the gate, and the workers I asked, the employees, they are panicking. Rumor is payroll is going to bounce on Friday. People are terrified." I felt a sick weight in my stomach. This was the collateral damage I had sworn to avoid. The secretaries, the site managers, the janitors, they were innocent. They had mortgages. They had kids. They were living paycheck to paycheck, just like I had been 7 years ago. Ava's leak hadn't hurt me. It had hurt them. I couldn't let them suffer for my father's sins. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my personal accounts. I had savings. Significant savings from 7 years of high-risk investing. I called Evan. "I need to set up a third-party payroll bridge." I said, what Evan asked, sounding confused. "The workers at Patterson Ridge. They are going to miss their checks on Friday because of this leak. I want to fund the payroll." "Stella, you are the creditor. You are supposed to be squeezing them. If you fund payroll, you are propping them up." "I am not propping him up," I said fiercely. "I am keeping innocent people from losing their homes. Structure it as an emergency vendor payment from a neutral entity. Make sure it is anonymous. Make sure Gordon thinks it is a bank error or a miracle. I don't care. Just get the money to the employees. It will cost you $50,000. Evan warned. "You won't see that money back?" "I don't care." I said, "Do it." I authorized the wire. $50,000. It was a significant chunk of my liquidity, but as I pressed the button, I didn't feel regret. I felt a strange sense of power. Gordon Patterson would have let them starve to save his own skin. I was feeding them. I was strong, but I was not cruel. I was disciplined, but I was human. That afternoon, Evan called me back. He sounded different, quieter. "The payroll bridge is set," he said. "The employees will get paid tomorrow." "Good. Stella," he said, "I have the forensic report, the handwriting analysis." "Yes. Is it Gordon?" I asked, bracing myself for the confirmation that my father was a felon. Evan paused. "It is not Gordon," he said. I frowned. "What?" "The handwriting expert is definitive," Evan said. "The signature on the guarantee, the Stella Patterson signature, does not match your father's handwriting profile. The pressure points are different. The slant is different. Then who signed it?" I asked. "It matches the handwriting of Derek Voss." I sat back, stunned. Derek Voss, the fixer, the man who had threatened Nate. "So Gordon didn't forge it?" I asked. "Technically, no," Evan said. "It appears Derek Voss forged your signature, but Gordon must have known." I argued. Voss wouldn't just forge a guarantee for $3 million on a whim. Gordon must have told him to do it, almost certainly. Evan agreed. Gordon likely gave the order, "Get it done, I don't care how," and Voss got it done. But legally, that distinction matters. If we go to court, Gordon can claim he had no idea. He can claim Voss acted alone. He can throw Voss to the wolves and claim he is a victim of a rogue consultant. My mind raced. Gordon was an enabler. He was the architect, but he had kept his hands clean. He had used a tool to commit the crime. This changed the strategy. If I exposed the forgery now, Gordon might escape. He would sacrifice Voss, feign ignorance, and walk away with his reputation bruised but intact. I couldn't let that happen. I need to tie them together. I said, I need to prove that Gordon knew. That is what the final meeting is for. Evan said, we need to get them in the same room. We need to get Voss to crack. If Voss realizes Gordon is going to sacrifice him, he might turn. I looked at the calendar. Friday. The final meeting. Set it up, I said, where Evan asked. Northmark Harbor has a private conference center in Seabrook Point. Right, yes. It is isolated. Secure. Book it. I said, invite everyone. Gordon, Pamela Stroud, the auditors, and Derek Voss. Tell them Juniper Vale is ready to present the final restructuring terms. And you? Evan asked. Will you be there? I stood up and walked to the closet. I pulled out the suit I had bought specifically for this day. It was black, sharp, armor. Yes, I said, I will be there. It is time they met the managing member. Friday morning dawned gray and cold. The Atlantic Ocean was churning against the rocks at Seabrook Point. The conference center was a glass box perched on the edge of a cliff, isolated from the rest of the world. I arrived early. I entered through a side door, escorted by Evan. He looked at me. You look terrified, I suggested. Ready, he said. I walked into the conference room. It was empty. A long, polished table. 12 chairs. A view of the angry sea. I took the seat at the head of the table. I placed my laptop in front of me. I placed the forensic report next to it. I placed the sealed envelope containing the emails Ava had given me next to that. I waited. At 9:55, the elevator chimed. I heard voices. This is a waste of time. Pamela Stroud was saying, we are here to dictate terms, not listen to them. Relax. Pam. A smooth, oily voice replied, Derek Voss. We will scare them off. These shell companies always fold when you show them teeth. And then, a third voice, the deep, booming baritone that had haunted my nightmares for 7 years. Just get it done, Gordon Patterson said. I want this over by lunch. The door opened. They walked in. Gordon was in the lead. He looked furious, impatient. He was flanked by Pamela Stroud, who looked like a knife in a suit, and Derek Voss, who wore a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Behind them trailed Miles Tarrant, looking like he was walking to his execution, and Ava, who was pale as a sheet. Gordon stopped. He looked at the head of the table. He saw a woman in a black suit, sitting with her back to the ocean, her face in shadow. Who are you? He barked. Where is the representative from Juniper Vale? I leaned forward. The light hit my face. Hello, Dad? I said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was violent. Gordon's face went slack. The color drained out of it, leaving him gray and waxen. He blinked. Once, twice, as if his brain was refusing to process the visual data. Stella, he whispered. I stood up. I am the representative from Juniper Vale, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the woman who had built herself from nothing. And we have a lot to talk about. The conference room at the Northmark Harbor Bank Private Center was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a glass box suspended over the gray, churning Atlantic, designed to make everyone inside feel small against the scale of the ocean. The air conditioning was set to a sterile chill. On the polished mahogany table, bottles of sparkling water stood in perfect rows, sweating condensation onto the wood. It was the theater of high finance. It was designed to strip away emotion and reduce human lives to line items. I sat at the head of the table, my back to the view. I watched them file in. Gordon Patterson led the procession. He walked with the heavy rolling gait of a man who had never been told no in his adult life. He was flanked by Pamela Stroud, his litigator, who wore a suit the color of a bruise and carried a briefcase that looked like a weapon. Behind them came Derek Voss, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance, and finally Miles Tarrant and Ava, looking like prisoners marching to the gallows. They took their seats. They opened their leather folios. They clicked their expensive pens. It was a ritual, a corporate dance. And then Gordon looked up. He looked at the head of the table, expecting a faceless banker or a hedge fund manager in a fleece vest. He saw me. The reaction was not a movie moment. He did not gasp. He did not clutch his chest. He froze. His entire body went rigid, as if an electrical current had just locked his muscles. The color did not drain from his face. It seemed to curdle, turning a sallow, waxen gray. His eyes narrowed, focusing on me with a terrifying intensity. He was fighting the shock, wrestling it down into the dark cellar where he kept his fear. His jaw muscles bunched. He was fighting shame with anger, and the anger was winning. "Stella," he said. The word was not a greeting. It was an accusation. "Good morning, Gordon," I said. Pamela Stroud looked between us, her confusion rippling through her professional mask. "Mr. Patterson, do you know this woman?" Gordon did not take his eyes off me. He stared at me as if I were a ghost that had crawled out of the ocean to haunt him. "She is my daughter," he spat. Pamela stiffened. "I was not informed that she is not relevant." Gordon cut her off, his voice rising. "This is a joke. Is this a joke? Stella, did you sleep your way into a job at the bank? Get out. Get out before I have security drag you out." He pointed at the door. It was the same gesture he had used 7 years ago, the same finger, the same absolute certainty that he owned the space he stood in. But I was not 24 anymore, and this was not his house. I did not move. I did not blink. I am not an employee of the bank. "Gordon," I said. My voice was steady, low, and clear. It carried across the room without effort. "I am the managing member of Juniper Vale Holdings, LLC. I am the sole owner of the distressed debt tranche that controls the mortgage on your headquarters, the liens on your equipment, and the personal guarantees signed by you and your wife." I paused, letting the words land like stones. "I own you, Gordon." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation and the distant crash of the waves below. Gordon lowered his hand. He sat down slowly, as if his legs had suddenly lost their strength. He looked at the file in front of me. "Juniper Vale," he whispered. "You, me, but how?" "It does not matter how," I said. I opened the folder. "What matters is the timeline. You are in default. You have rejected our restructuring proposal. The principal balance of $12 million is due immediately." "Do you have the funds?" Gordon sneered. "This is ridiculous. You are playing dress-up. Stella, you do not understand how this works. You cannot just demand I can." I interrupted. "And I have—" Pamela Stroud leaned forward, sensing her client was losing control. "Ms. Patterson, let us be reasonable. If there is a familial conflict here, perhaps we should recuse." "There is no conflict," I said, turning my gaze to her. "This is a financial transaction. Your client borrowed money he could not pay back. He leveraged his assets based on fraudulent projections. And now, the bill has come due." Fraudulent Gordon slammed his hand on the table. "Watch your mouth, girl. I built this company from dirt. I did what I had to do to keep it alive." "You did what you had to do," I repeated. "Yes," he roared. "The market turned. The liquidity dried up. I made the hard choices. I protected the legacy. And what would you know about that? You. Who ran away, you. Who would have ruined everything with your bastard child and your scandal. I saved this family. Stella, I cut out the rot so the tree could survive." The words hung in the air, ugly and naked. I cut out the rot. He was talking about me. He was talking about my son. I felt a cold fire in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and shatter the glass. But I didn't. I reached for the second folder. You didn't save the family. Gordon, I said softly. You cannibalized it. I slid the document across the polished wood. It spun and came to a stop in front of him. This is a forensic handwriting analysis report from Redfern and Holt Advisory. I said. Gordon looked at it. He didn't touch it. It concerns the guarantee for the Northmark Harbor loan, dated 7 years ago. I continued. Specifically, the guarantor signature of Stella Patterson. Gordon went still. Derek Voss, who had been leaning back in his chair looking bored, suddenly sat up. His eyes darted to the door. I know I did not sign that document, I said, because on the day it was signed, I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment in Riverton, counting change to buy diapers. I was not in your office. I looked at Derek Voss. The report concludes that the signature is a forgery, I said, and it identifies the author of the forgery. Derek Voss stood up. This is bullshit, he said, his voice cracking. This is a setup. Gordon, tell them. Sit down, mister. Voss, Evan Cross said. Evan spoke from the corner of the room, where he had been standing silently. He walked to the table now, placing a stack of papers in front of Derek. We have the email chains. Derek, Evan said calmly, we have the instructions from your personal account to the notary. We have the bank compliance memo where you explicitly stated that you had witnessed the signature yourself. Derek looked at the papers. He looked at Gordon. Gordon. He pleaded. You told me to handle it. You said I said nothing, Gordon snapped. Turning on him instantly, I never told you to forge a signature. If you cut corners, that is on you. Derek, I trusted you to get the paperwork done legally. The room changed temperature. It dropped 10 degrees. We all watched it happen. We watched Gordon Patterson throw his right-hand man to the wolves without a second of hesitation. Derek's face went red, then white. He realized, in that second, that he was the fuse. And Gordon was holding the match. You son of a bitch, Derek whispered. I did everything for you. The zoning bribes, the union payoffs, the kid, the boyfriend. He stopped. He looked at me. I froze. The boyfriend. He knows. I said. Gordon looked straight ahead, his jaw set like concrete. Derek Voss laughed. It was a high, hysterical sound. Oh, he knows. He paid for it. $10,000 to get rid of the baby daddy. That was me. But the order came from the big man. I looked at my father. He didn't deny it. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed that the help was talking out of turn. That is enough, Pamela Stroud said, closing her briefcase. We are ending this meeting. My client is not going to be subjected to your client is about to be arrested. I said. Pamela stopped. The forgery carries a minimum sentence of 5 years. I said. The bank fraud carries 20. And since the foundation was used as collateral for the fraudulent loan. I turned my eyes to Ava. Ava was shaking. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her fingernails were white. Ava, I said. She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. Stella, please, I told you I would protect you if you gave me the truth. I said, but you didn't give me the truth. Ava, you gave me a leak. You tried to destroy my reputation to save your country club membership. I was scared, she cried. You are a liability. Ava, I said, using the word deliberately. You are the vice president of a foundation that laundered money. I can help you, Ava blurted out. I know where the rest of the money is. I know about the offshore accounts. I can give you the account numbers. Just promise me. Promise me I won't go to jail. Gordon turned to look at his other daughter, his golden child. Ava, he said, his voice full of betrayal. Shut up, Dad, Ava screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You did this. You made me sign those checks. You told me it was normal. I'm not going to prison for you. She looked at me. Desperate, pathetic. Stella, please. We are sisters. I looked at her. I saw the fear. But I also saw the calculation. She was still trying to trade. I don't want your deal. Ava, I said coldly, you have one option. You cooperate fully with the federal investigators. You resign from the foundation today. You surrender any assets purchased with foundation funds, or you face civil action like anyone else, but that will leave me with nothing," she wailed. I looked at her expensive dress. I looked at her diamond earrings. "Then you can start over," I said, like I did. Ava collapsed back into her chair, sobbing into her hands. The room was in ruins. The allies were turning on each other. The facade was gone, and then a quiet voice spoke from the end of the table. "I signed them too." We all turned. Elaine Patterson was sitting there. She hadn't said a word since she walked in. She looked small in her gray suit. Her hands were folded on the table. Gordon looked at her. "Elaine, be quiet." "No," she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't look down. She looked at him. "I signed them. Gordon, the guarantees, the foundation papers. I signed them all." "You didn't know what you were doing," Gordon said dismissively. "You are confused." "I wasn't confused," she said. "I was obedient." She took a breath. The sound was loud in the silent room. "I signed them because I trusted you," she said. "I signed them because I thought you were the smartest man in the world. I thought you were protecting us. But you weren't protecting us. You were just protecting yourself." She looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. "I am sorry. Stella," she whispered. "I should have spoken up 7 years ago. I should have left with you, Mom." I started. "No," she said. "Let me say it. I stayed because I was afraid. I let him erase you because I was afraid of the silence in the house. But the silence is worse now. It is so loud I can't sleep." She turned back to Gordon. "You are a liar, Gordon," she said, "and you are a thief. You stole our daughter's life. You stole my name, and I am done signing for you." Gordon stared at her, his mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He had expected betrayal from Derek. He had feared it from Ava. But Elaine, his silent, dutiful wife. That was the blow that broke the armor. He looked around the table. He saw Derek, hateful and cornered. He saw Ava, sobbing and selfish. He saw Elaine, finally finding her spine. And he saw me, the architect of his ruin. "Clear the room," he said. His voice was a rasp. "Mr. Patterson," Pamela warned. "I advise against—" "Get out," Gordon roared. "Everyone, get out. I want to talk to my daughter." Pamela gathered her papers. Evan looked at me. I nodded. They left. Derek, Ava, Miles, Elaine, Pamela, Evan. They filed out of the glass box, leaving us alone with the ocean. Gordon stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the water. He kept his back to me. He looked old. For the first time, he looked his age. The shoulders were slumped. The suit hung a little loose. "You won," he said. I didn't answer. "You outmaneuvered me," he said. "You bought the debt. You flipped the lawyer. You turned the family. It was impressive." He turned around. His face was composed again. But the arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a weary, cynical appraisal. "So," he said, "what do you want?" "Stella." I looked at him. "I want you to admit it." I said. "Admit what?" "That I forged the signature." "Fine. I did it." Voss held the pen. "But I told him to do it. Are you recording this? Go ahead. Send me to jail." "It is not about the signature," I said. "Then what? Money you want the company. Take it. It is worthless anyway." I stood up. I walked over to him. I stopped 3 feet away. "I wanted you to see me." I said. He frowned. "See you." 7 years ago. You looked at me, and you saw liability. I said, "You saw a mistake. You didn't see your daughter. You didn't see a person. You saw a balance sheet item that needed to be written off." I took a breath. "I wanted you to see that I am not a liability. Dad, I am the one who survived. I am the one who built something real. I wanted you to respect me." Gordon looked at me. He looked at my eyes. He looked at the set of my jaw. "I do respect you," he said quietly. "You are the only one of them who is like me." I recoiled. The words felt like a slap. "I am nothing like you." I said, "Aren't you—" He gestured to the empty chairs. You just dismantled your family to get what you wanted. You used leverage. You used fear. You isolated your enemies. That is exactly what I would have done. No, I said, I did it to stop you. I did it to protect Mom. I did it to protect the employees you were going to starve. He shrugged. Motive is a coat of paint. Stella, the mechanics are the same. Power is power. I looked at him. I saw the tragedy of him. He truly believed that. He believed that love was just a transaction, and that power was the only currency. He couldn't understand why I was different because he didn't have the language for it. I walked back to the table. I picked up 2 sealed envelopes. I held them up. I have 2 paths for you. Gordon, I said. I held up the first envelope. It was white. Envelope A. I said, this is a restructuring agreement. It keeps Patterson Ridge alive. It funds the payroll. It protects the employees. It sets up a trust to keep Mom in the house for the rest of her life. Gordon looked at it. And the catch, I read the terms. You plead guilty to a single count of falsifying business records, a misdemeanor, not a felony. We keep the forgery sealed. You resign as CEO. You resign from the board. You are stripped of all voting rights. You retire. Gordon, completely. You go to Florida. You play golf. And you never touch a contract again. He stared at the envelope. Total surrender. And the other one, he asked. I held up the second envelope. It was manila. Thick. Envelope B. I said, this is the referral package. It contains the forensic report, the email chains, the affidavits from Derek and Ava, and the full audit of the foundation. I hand this to the district attorney and the SEC on my way out. And you go to prison, I said, for a long time. The company is liquidated. The house is seized. Your legacy is destroyed. You die in a cell. Gordon looked at the 2 envelopes. He looked at the white one. The path of survival. The path where he kept his freedom but lost his power. He looked at the manila one. The path of destruction. Choose, I said. Gordon reached out. His hand hovered over the white envelope. He could save the company. He could save Elaine's home. All he had to do was admit he was wrong. All he had to do was step down. All he had to do was lose. I saw his hand tremble. His pride was a physical thing. It was a wall he had built brick by brick for 60 years. Asking him to tear it down was like asking him to stop breathing. He looked at me. If I sign the white one, he said, his voice raspy, everyone knows I lost. Everyone knows my daughter beat me. Yes, I said, they will. He hesitated. I saw the struggle in his eyes. It was violent, the survival instinct battling the ego. He looked at the white envelope. He looked at the manila one. And then, for the first time in my life, I saw it. Fear. Real. Naked fear. The fear of a man who realizes he is not a god, but just a lonely old man in a room with a daughter he threw away. His hand shook. His fingers brushed the white paper, but he didn't pick it up. He just stood there, his hand hovering, caught between the death of his pride and the death of his life. I watched him. I didn't help him. I didn't push the envelope closer. The choice was his. I turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" he called out. There was panic in his voice now. "Stella." I stopped at the door. I looked back. "I'm going to see my son," I said. I opened the door and walked out. I walked past Evan, past my mother, past the ruins of my old life. I walked out into the cold, salt air. I didn't know which envelope he would pick. I didn't know if he could conquer his own nature. But as I walked toward the car, toward the future I had built, I realized it didn't matter. I had taken back my name, and that was enough. Thank you for listening to Revenge Stories. This story. You are a liability. Explored the cost of pride and the weight of family secrets. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Stella Patterson as she reclaimed her power. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below, telling me your city or country. And if you enjoyed this series, please subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss a new drama. Finally, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think Gordon did after Stella walked out? Did he choose the white envelope and save his family? Or did his pride force him to choose the manila envelope and burn it all down? Share your theories in the comments in English. I can't wait to read them.